Next ball game, it is going to be Maryland taking on NC State. That'll be a 12 o'clock Eastern kickoff on Friday in the Mayonnaise Bowl. Maryland's -2, totals 46. And even though the Wolfpack played some pretty strong defense this year, they did very little to establish a run game offensively. They actually finished in the bottom 25 in the nation in rush yards per game. And that's certainly bad news because they may have to go to work. Hold on. Yeah. Sorry, I'm confusing myself. I'm reading the notes here as we're going along. Yeah, they played great defense, struggled on offense, very little to establish the run. Bottom 25 in rush yards per game. Definitely bad news because they're going to have to go to work with their third stringer at quarterback. Devin Leary's out. Backup MJ Morris is questionable. So they're going to have to rely on the run, and they haven't run the ball well or even committed to running the ball. They're also facing a Maryland team who covered against the likes of Ohio State and Michigan this year. When it comes to throwing the ball, Talia Tungavailoa, he continues to get better. He completed nearly 70% of his passes this year, and he threw for nearly 2,800 yards. Now, injury-wise, Fa'amatu and Jarrett are questionable for Maryland. Meanwhile, for the Wolfpack, Sumo Karmbe is questionable for them. When it comes to the weather report, sunny and mild in Charlotte on Friday. Now, scoring-wise, NC State saw 4 out of their last 7 stay under the number. Meanwhile, Maryland went 60% to the under in their last 10. I'm going to lean toward Maryland -2, under 46. Next contest, it is going to be Pitt, UCLA, 2 o'clock Sun Bowl. UCLA's -6, totals 54. And even though the Bruins racked up a bunch of yards this year, they really played some lackluster defense. They actually finished 120th in passing defense this year. When it comes to covering the number, the Bruins failed to cover in their last 3 straight. They're facing a Pittsburgh team who won their last 4 straight to close out the year. Victories over the likes of Miami, Duke, and Syracuse. Plus, starting quarterback Keaton Slovis, he's got plenty of experience against the Pac-12. He actually transferred from USC this season. Now, when it comes to defensive play, nobody ran on the Panthers this year. Not many people had success running the ball against Pitt. They have a top 10 rushing defense. Servoja Dennis, he had 91 tackles and 7 sacks. And speaking of the pass rush, Des Alexander, he had a handful of sacks this year himself. Now, star D lineman Kalijah Cansey, he'll be sitting this one out for Pitt. Hill and Abanaconda are scratched as well. Meanwhile, for UCLA, Andrews is inactive for them. Now, when it comes to the weather, 60 degrees and mostly sunny, but we will see a steady wind here in El Paso, Texas, probably looking at around 15 miles an hour. So it could possibly affect the kicking game. When it comes to the total, Pitt went 80% to the over in their last 10. UCLA saw 7 out of their last 10 get over the total themselves. I'm going to lean toward Pitt +6 over 54. Next matchup, not on our big screen for some reason, but it is going to be Notre Dame squaring off against South Carolina, 3:30 Gator Bowl. Notre Dame's -3, totals 52. And after a slow start, the Irish won 8 out of their last 10. They played some real tough defense. They had a top 20 secondary, and they finished in the top 25 in fewest total yards allowed. Ben Morrison had 5 picks from that secondary, including a pick 6. Meanwhile, Isaiah Foskey led the pass rush with 11 sacks. Now they're facing a South Carolina team who is little threat running the football offensively. They finished 103rd in rushing. When it comes to defensive play, they allowed nearly 200 yards a game on the ground. Now, injury-wise, Dawkins is questionable. Kaba and Van are out. Meanwhile, for Notre Dame, Merriweather is questionable for them. When it comes to the total, the Irish saw unders against the likes of Stanford, BYU, and Cal. Meanwhile, South Carolina, they saw unders against the likes of Florida, Missouri, and Kentucky. I'm going to lean toward Notre Dame -3, under 52. Next matchup, it is going to be Ohio taking on Wyoming, and that'll be 4:30 p.m. Eastern start time in the Arizona Bowl. Ohio's -2, totals 43. And even though Ohio was solid this year, they did lose starting quarterback Tanner Rourke for the season, and that definitely showed in the MAC championship. They scored just 7 points without their starter. And when it comes to defensive play, there's really only one other team who's got a worse secondary than Ohio. These guys allowed more yards a game through the air than any other team in the country except for one. Now, they're facing a Wyoming squad who won 4 out of their last 6. And they've done a nice job running the football this year. They're gaining nearly 200 yards a game on the ground. Running back Titus Swen, he was a 1,000-yard rusher this year, and he averaged 5 yards a carry. When it comes to defensive play, Devin Harris and Oluwasi Omotosho had 15 combined sacks. Now, weather-wise, 62 degrees with a slight breeze by game time. When it comes to the scoring, Wyoming saw their last 5 straight stay under the total. Meanwhile, Ohio went 6-3 to the under in their last 9. Give me Wyoming +2, under 43. Next game, Tennessee, Clemson, 8 o'clock Orange Bowl. Clemson's -5.5, total 63 and a hook. And even though the Tigers lost quarterback DJ Uiagalelei to the transfer portal, I actually think it's their defense that's going to keep them in this one. They allowed just 20 points a game. And they finished in the top 25 in the country in fewest yards allowed. Jeremiah Trotter and Jalen Phillips, they've combined for over 145 tackles this year. Meanwhile, Barrett Carter and Tyler Davis, they combined for nearly double-digit sacks. Now, they're facing a Tennessee squad who's going to work without their starting quarterback themselves. Hendon Hooker's out with that knee injury. And I'll tell you this much, as good as they were this year, at least in the first half, the Vols lost 2 out of their final 4 ball games, and they played some pretty bad defense. They arguably had the worst secondary in the SEC. Now, injury-wise, Tillman, Hyatt, Hooker, and Burrell, they're out for Tennessee. Meanwhile, for Clemson, Murphy and Simpson are out for them. When it comes to the weather report, 74 degrees and mostly clear in Miami. When it comes to the total, Clemson saw unders against the likes of North Carolina, Louisville, and Syracuse. Meanwhile, 3 out of Tennessee's last 5 stayed under the line. I'm going to lean toward Clemson, -5.5, under 63 and a hook.